think we're live, Pedro.
Great.
Good to see you again, sir.
Yes, likewise. Hope
Is
your
it?
trip went fine.
Well, as you can see, I'm not in Lisbon anymore. As you can, I think I see from the outside window.
Yeah.
Is it still as hot and sunny as it was when I left?
It is. I mean, it's like, what, 27 today out there.
It's not as hot then because it was a bit too hot for me, to be honest, last week.
Right, so should we hit it off?
Yes, we will hit it off. So I'll shortly introduce and frame the session. So hello, everyone. My name is Shil. I'm the managing director of accelerator programs at Startup Wise Guys, and namely in this session, I'm the managing director of the upcoming Web3 program that we are doing together with Mr. Pedro Cerdeira, who is representing our partner 3 Capital, partner both in funding and in mentorship and network. So we are going to do our second batch of Web3 acceleration program in the fall. We are looking for 4 to 8 teams, Web3 teams to invest in, up to 150K safe convertible investments, with a possibility of up to 300K follow-on after the program. What does that mean, follow-on? If your startup is selected for the program, you are in the program, we will set KPIs for you together, of course. And if you do well during the program, if you accelerate at a promising rate and your traction is scalable, then we will be happy to invest more. So right now we are in the scouting season. We are still looking for teams. We've already had quite some teams at product demos and been assessing them. But we're still looking for more. This is the second session Pedro and I are doing to sort of answer questions proactively about the program, who should apply, how to prepare your application, what sort of teams are we looking for, and also specifically for today's session, we've been getting, during scouting and promoting the program, we've been getting sort of a line of questions of Web3 founders along the following topics that were also in the event description. So namely, the first one concerning fundraising for Web3 startups. So as people who are a little bit into crypto and Web3 know, one popular or sort of intuitive way for Web3 startups to raise funds is through their own community by launching a token, which tokenizes the value of their whole protocol. So in this sense, we've been getting a lot of questions. I'm a Web3 founder. Why should I still care about traditional investors such as business angels and VCs if I can just launch my token and raise funds for my community directly?
Should I?
I think you can attack this question or address this question from a lot of angles. So I guess we can start with one. By the way, so this is what we were starting out with. If you're on the audience and you have any sort of question on this topic or also broadly related about the program, about applying, about anything related to the Web3 program for Startup Wise Guys and 3 Capital, please leave your questions in the chat and we will happily address them. On that note, Pedro, why should Web3 founders still care about people like you?
Yeah, so first, I just want to put out a little thing, which is a little comment on the word traditional. I don't consider myself or 3 Capital or Startup Wise Guys or most of the people that sort of orbit around this world traditional at all. So traditional here refers to more traditional forms of funding, I would say, and
Yes.
that's how it should be understood. So the question is quite simple and it makes a ton of sense. You can raise money. Web3 is sort of the disintermediation of things, and you can get to your true fans and your community very directly. And there's a lot of empowerment by the people. So why not do the thing directly versus going through the more traditional processes? Let's put it like that. The thing is that there's a world of hurt for those that sort of try to venture into the areas of a more direct fundraising, like directly to the community. And I'll tell you exactly why. When you're fundraising, this is a regulated activity. There's no way around it. There's regulation around this, and that's the consensus that we have all reached as a civilization, that there should be some sort of rules around this topic so that you do not fool the people that give you money. So the reason for this basically is historic. A lot of the stuff has happened in the past. You don't need to go way back. You can think of the Wild West and what happened over there, where money was sort of exchanging hands from one side to the other, and people were losing money without guarantees, and a lot of that was going on. So, in order for this world not to be the Wild West, and that there is some protection to people on what you are doing and to hold you true to what you're saying. If you're fundraising, there are regulations, and these regulations should be followed. Otherwise, you might find yourself in jail. Simple as that. So in crypto, people are sort of used to scams and rug pulls, and call it what you want. There's a ton of this thing, variations of this thing. But the fact of the matter is that when you're fundraising, this is supposed to be serious stuff. And you're actually inviting people to come on board and to buy a product which is a part of your company or a part of your product or a part of whatever. And there's supposed to be some strings attached. So people are going to give you money so that you do a certain set of activities that you've promised to do, not other. And that the whole thing sort of goes smoothly, and nobody is wrecked in the middle of all of this. So it is a regulated process, and being a regulated process, there's sometimes people in Web3 tend to sort of facilitate on these things and don't care too much and think of this as like this is the old world, not the new world, and the new world is a lot different. But we're talking about basic social rules here. If you're doing something and if you're raising money, there is an implicit contract to this thing that you're doing. So, in other words, people that are going to give you money, they're believing in what you're saying you're going to do. And there's an implicit promise that you will somehow return their money and more. Okay. It helps if you don't go off script and try to do different things because it might be tricky. You can launch a token, that's all fine. I've found myself in a position some time ago where I had to explain to somebody who had actually raised 1.5 million that it would be a good idea to have a company incorporated to hold this money, and maybe this is something that is worth going through. Some people might not know what's really behind this, but companies exist as a form of you limiting your liability. So, in other words, most companies have some sort of limited liability thing at the end, like LLC, limited liability company, or whatever. And it basically means that they're responsible up to a certain amount, which is the amount that they define at the corporation. So if you raise 1.5 million on your own personal name and things go wrong and you end up in court, you answer with everything that you belong against creditors. So in other words, you can lose your house, you can lose your goods, you can lose everything because your liability is not limited. So in this world again, and there's sort of this social contract that we all sort of implicitly sign when we are born, we are supposed to pay taxes. And if you decide not to pay taxes, then basically you're going rogue. And that means that it's just a question of time until some jurisdiction finds you and holds you accountable. And it's not fun when you go down that path. So governments do not like people that live outside the system, and you will not go very far. So it makes a lot of sense that all of this fun and games that we all do when we develop projects and we're actually busy doing our own little dent in the universe and creating the future and all of that, it really helps if we do it, if we end up doing it within a set of social rules that is acceptable and that makes sense. Okay. And that basically means that you need to get to expert level very quickly on all these shenanigans that go around fundraising and raising money and creating companies and all of that. So I would tell you that more traditional approaches give you this structure and the fact that you can continue to raise money in the future. Because if you have some sort of construct and you end up raising money right now from your community, for example, the next time you're going to raise money, and if all goes well, you're going to need it. If you are not within these boundaries and this sort of boxes, normalized boxes that the world puts us in, you're not going to get any money. You're not going to get any money. You basically become inaccessible.
Like in a way, it's also why would you cut yourself off a priori from any sort of funding source, right? It's like it doesn't have to be one or the other, but there's a lot of idealism because precisely because Web3 in the extreme in the ideology going forward part is a disintermediation, as you put it. There's this like instinct to like, oh, we don't need to go to the traditional route. We can just do everything through smart contracts and interact with every sort of user directly. They can all be direct investors, but the fact is that there is no such thing as the fully disintermediated or decentralized world. And you are essentially just putting yourself outside of the, if you want to put it between air quotes, old world, and you are just cheating yourself in that way. Because also something just very obvious things that we haven't even mentioned yet is that also if you get investors on board, traditional or not, these are usually people like yourself, people with a lot of experience who also are there for you as mentors, advisors, and who have a very wide network to both help you reach all sorts of business goals, among which connecting you to other investors for fundraising as well.
On that note, just to elaborate a little bit further into being uninvestable. I mean, sometimes
that's
people,
a good word, uninvestable. Yeah, making yourself uninvestable.
Sometimes people don't care too much, or they don't know too much the intricacies of this business. If you're investing other people's money, like, which is exactly what happens when you're a VC. If you're a business angel, most of the time you're investing your own money. It's one thing. But if you're a venture capitalist, you are investing other people's money. And this is a regulated job. Okay. So there's one thing called fiduciary responsibility to the people that gave you their money so that you can go and invest it. And you have a mandate. The word for this is exactly mandate, which means it tells you exactly the sort of stuff that you can do with their money. There are mandates that, for example, do not allow you to invest in stuff like gambling. There's other types of mandates. But there's one thing which is very clear. I mean, if you have the fiduciary responsibility to the people that gave you money to invest it, you need things to be clear and to be regulated. Otherwise, you cannot put money in there. You can go to jail for that type of thing. So again, don't make yourselves uninvestable, because it's not a good idea. You will stall for lack of money if you're uninvestable. And maybe that's the end of a very promising story.
We're gonna pick up this storyline a bit later, because in the meantime, we've gotten some comments and questions in the chat, which I think are worth discussing. So from Nestor Nicolas Campos Rojas, we have hello for starter wise guys and Tricomo. What type of Web3 startups are you looking for? Customer apps, infrastructure, networks, anything else? I can sort of start off here. So Startup Wise Guys is mostly a B2B focused accelerator. We are quite general in our overall focus, but we have specific verticals that we focus on. So other than we've had SaaS, we've had XR, we have PropTech, sustainability. Web3 is one of the verticals. So specifically, we are looking for Web3 startups that are focused on B2B customers. And by B2B, I mean particularly the end customer, the one that is putting the money, has to be a company or a business. We are focusing on these mostly because we have as Startup-wise guys, we have a very long track record in coaching and scaling business development and sales processes, as well as the best practice SaaS protocol where you have automated, scalable onboarding, landing pages, lead generation processes. So if you have a consumer app, I mean, there are obviously a lot of let's say hybrid models, right, where your end user might be customer or consumer. But if that is the case, if you are a fully B2C sort of app, it's probably not the best fit with the accelerator that we have. What we do sometimes have is where the end user is a consumer or customer, but they're the actual, in the business model, the actual party that is paying for everything, or that is the end client putting the money for fronting the revenue, is a company or a government or some sort of institution. That's basically it from my end as sort of the general scope of startups we're looking for in the Web3 vertical. Passing it on to you now, Pedro, as you are more looking into what are the startups that interest you the most, maybe also riding some of the innovation waves that are currently happening in Web3.
Yeah, I second everything that Gilles has said. Maybe I should explain a little bit of the why that is. So there's basically two types of models, or fundamentally there's two types of models. Either you go B2B or you go B2C. You go business to business or business to consumer. If you go business to consumer, then that basically means you're selling directly to the consumer, and it implies a certain quantity of things in terms of business model that I will reach in a second. If you're going for business to business, then your customer are other businesses. Okay. The basic difference is that business to consumer is sort of like a giant sausage making machine, in the sense that you really find out the product that interests the masses, like a sausage, and you find a way to produce that product, set up the sausage making machine, and it's a very fine-tuned sort of thing. You've found exactly what is the type of sausage and what are the ingredients that people are willing to pay for and that are popular, and so on and so forth. And then it becomes a question of deep pockets and money. So the more meat you can put, if the sausage has meat, the more meat that you can put into the machine, the more sausage will come at the other side. And as long as you make a profit on this, there's a little bit of margin in there, you're fine. But scaling the business requires very deep pockets. And guess what? Because people like to change their minds very often, usually these sausage making machines go out of tune. So it's really easy to sort of, I'm popular today and I'm not anymore tomorrow. Okay. But the basic point here is that it takes an awful lot of money to get things going and to expand and to sort of market the sausages to the masses, because people don't know that this thing exists, and you need to go out and put outdoors and stuff so that people just bump into it and they know that there's a product like this. But mainly the reason is that the price for scaling, it's incredibly high.
It's also B2C is also just a way more ambiguous process. In B2B, it is purely all the arguments are economic. If you have an ICP, so a specific decision maker role within a specific sort of company, you can very clearly structure. This is exactly for which kind of company and for the person within that company I'm solving this problem for. And your argument to them is very clearly, it would always come down to something like, I can help you achieve more with less. I can help you save costs. I can help you generate more revenue, or I can do it more efficiently than what you have currently going on. So in terms of, for us as an accelerator and as an investor, it makes everything way more predictable and a more clear process towards driving traction and scale, which makes it for us a kind of a repeatable. Obviously, every product market context is still different and nuanced in its own kind of way. But if you compare that to B2C sort of apps, it's a lot more about emotions and habits and trends and hypes, and by the time you actually get a foothold in the market where you can stay relevant for a long amount of time, that you're not just out of fashion in 1 or 2 months, that is something that only very, very few apps actually pull off.
Yeah, just and if you think you're the one that's going to go viral, think again. Your product most probably is not going to go viral. Going viral takes a lot of work. But basically, yeah, I mean, if you're hunting, it's a lot better when you know everything about the animal you're hunting, B2B.
Yeah. Just think of how precisely you can target specific decision makers on LinkedIn. You know exactly who to find and who you should get into a conversation with. And then if your value is good enough, it's pretty easy to convince them, honestly, to give you at least a shot at a conversation and a demo.
So it's a focused approach, and it makes a lot more sense from the resource perspective to focus your efforts on that type of companies or that particular people within that company, and so on and so forth. So that's the reason why we prefer B2B. B2C is difficult and really expensive to get through with. The other thing that's very relevant, and it ties a lot into some of the things that we have here on the chat, is the utility of the thing. So you got to have some utility, you need to bring some value to the table, and you need to provide a solution to a problem. You cannot be a solution in search of a problem, because that thing is very difficult to sell, or at least you need to evangelize and educate your customers in advance, which is not a good thing, believe me, because when a sales cycle takes like a year or two or something like that, you need to finance that thing. Okay, so you need to have intrinsic utility or value that is sellable and that interests somebody. So these are the two criteria that I would put up front. Life is not black and white, obviously. There's some things which are a little bit more gray, but you need to have utility, and you need to be B2B so that you can focus your efforts and your resources.
Nestor Nicolas Campos Rojas, lovely name. I hope that answered your question. If it didn't, please follow up with another comment. Also, if you feel like telling us sort of more specifically if you're building something, what it is, always happy to discuss that as well. Just also wanted to take the time to shout out a comment from Samuel from Score Stars, who was a graduate from a previous batch. He says, "We learned a lot during the program. Our company grew in all angles. We appreciate that even after the program, we can seek help and assistance for whatever we need, and you've been there for us." So he thanks us, and we thank you for saying that, and it's wonderful to read. And yeah,
thanks, Sam. That was nice.
Yeah, very nice. So yeah, Nestor says that it answered this question, so we're happy to read that. Next question we have is from Alan, who asks, and this is more again back to the topic that we were discussing before about fundraising for Web3 startups. He's wondering about, what do you think about founder-investor incentive alignment? How might that differ between token versus equity raise?
So this is two things, right?
Mm-hmm.
They can be connected or not really. Which one should we go for first?
Well, first the question is like, let's say I'm whether I may or whether I have part of the equity or whether I have a bunch of your tokens, doesn't that automatically align my incentives with that of the founder? And as whether it's a token or my shares, don't they go up in value either way if the founder performs well? Or am I have this like nagging sense that I'm thinking about it too simply?
I mean, at the end of the day, there's one thing which is sort of intrinsic to all of this, which is, yeah, you need to have alignment in between the investors and the founders. Okay, there's no way around this. That's what it is, and that's what needs to happen. You can have that alignment with equity, you can have that alignment with token, or you can have that alignment with both. Okay, so at the end of the day, it's just a question of the right incentives and understanding what is the type of behavior that that you want from the other part. Okay, so at the end of the day, the role of an investor is very specific and it should be quite well understood. We can go into that for a second if it makes sense. But the role of the founder, it's also very well understood, and there's some definite expectations around this. So, from an investor point of view, I mean, if somebody invests in you, they're giving you money with the expectation that you're going to return it multiplied by X, and hopefully within this lifetime span. Okay, so might not be tomorrow, but it's not going to be in 100 years. So people will give you money, but they're expecting a return on what they're giving you. Okay, and at the end of the day, if you go fully cold-blooded in term as an investor, you're comparing this investment to other types of investments. I mean, you could buy stock. What's the return that I can have if I buy any stock, for example? What is the return that I have if I buy bonds or T-bills, for example? I get 5%. So, I mean, if I'm going to risk my money, and this is all risk reward kind of thing, and you're allocating capital based on that premise, you're investing in a startup because you expect that you will double, triple, quadruple, 10x, 100x, whatever your money, period. This is what's behind it. Okay. Founders, on the other hand, are the expectation is that they're not there to do nice things or cool things. They're there to make a company work and generate that type of money. Simple as that. So these are the basic premises when you go into this type of thing. So then the question starts to be, okay, can I get this done with equity? Can I get this done with tokens? Can I get this done with both? Can I get this done somehow in another way? Okay. But you need to understand that the moment you allow an investor in, you become a partner with that person or that entity. And that basically means that entity will now have a saying on what you're doing. It's not you're just there to collect the money and then go and do whatever you want as you please. No, you have a certain responsibility. If people gave you money, they bought the ticket. They're in for the ride with you, and they have a saying on where the car is going, depending on how much money they've put in. If they own more than 50% of the company, then they definitely decide where the car is going and when it's going to stop and what it's going to do. So maybe this is not a very romantic view, but this is very realistic in the sense that, yeah, I mean, these are the roles, these are the expectations, and this is the game. If you're a founder, you're there to multiply. If you're an investor, you're there to provide the initial source of capital and then to get it multiplied by whatever. That's what it is. I mean, does it happen through a token alone? Why not? But that also means that you need to make sure that you have bulletproof tokenomics and that the thing's going to work. Because if you don't, guess what's going to happen? So at the end of the day, there's less risk into equity than there is with certain tokens, with certain tokenomics. Let's not generalize here because there's always exceptions. But you need to be extremely careful with this type of thing. I mean, there's, yeah, equity and the tokens or both are the instruments to create the right incentives and behaviors on the counterparty in that's playing the game. And this needs to work. So there's got to be clarity around what's happening. Otherwise, the chances are it's not going to go very far.
What are your thoughts on tokenized funds? Basically, like a hybrid of these two approaches. Whereas if you do tokens now, if you're just raising funding from your community to tokens, it's almost like open to anyone, right? In a way, it's like everyone can be your investor. And then you have the fund, you have traditional fundraising. But what if we the whole, just tokens are sort of economic assets that are being issued and verified through smart contracts. So we can also combine the two and just have funds that are tokenized, so that instead of the whole thing is just done through a smart contract, which also seems like the more innovative and smarter and more digitally native way.
So you're talking about a particular use case of tokens, okay, which is digital representations of stuff. Let's put it like that in generic terms. And the reason why we do digital representation of stuff, it's because it's easier to play with these things in the digital world than to do it in the physical world. Okay, so take something, and this already existed before crypto. So there's plenty of this stuff around. If you owned a home, you had a property title. Maybe you had to go into your country's register to buy the home, and somebody would write your name on that piece of property in there, and they would give you a piece of paper saying that you are the lawful owner of that piece of land or that house or that apartment or whatever it is. So this is physical, right? There's paper moving back and forth and registers and people and things and stuff and all of that. So what happens when you digitalize this? It becomes a token in the Web3 sense and in the sense that we commonly use when we talk about tokens. But at the end of the day, it's a representation of something. The piece of paper is also a representation of your right to that property. So instead of being a piece of paper, it's now a token which behavior is regulated by smart contracts, which is nice. Okay, so at the end of the day, I mean, all the funds are going to be tokenized in the future. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
It's just the trajectory of technology.
Yeah, and everything that we can represent digitally, it's a lot more convenient to deal with it. Like even email, if you want the example. I mean, you can go and deliver mail in person through a letter or a written piece of paper to your to its destination and to the people that you've addressed it to. I mean, you just jump on some sort of transportation, you go there and deliver the thing. Okay, so what do you have now? A digital representation, and you send it as an email, and the thing is digital, and there's no logistics around it, and it's sort of fluid in the digital sense. And an email that I would send to you would show up on your mailbox a couple of seconds later. That's simple as that. So again, it's a representation. It's a digital representation, and anything that can be digitally represented, it's going to happen. I have zero doubts about it.
It's and we can program it.
Yeah, it's only a question of when.
So we got a little bit off topic there in a way, but I wanted just to get back to Alan's asking if his question was answered by us, and if not, if he has additional thoughts or questions. If he's still watching, I hope you are, Alan. So sort of another line of questioning that we've been getting, other than, let's say, the balance or between or fundraising through tokens, fundraising from, let's say, the traditional more investor route, and how are they compatible? Is one better than the other? The other sort of line of questioning that we've been getting is Startup Wise Guys is in its whole is a rather Alan says thanks, by the way. So Startup Wise Guys is sort of rather general B2B accelerator in its scope, with specific focuses on verticals, of which Web3 is one of them. There is also very specific Web3 accelerators like Alliance DAO, for example. And so one line of questioning that we've been getting is, why would I apply to a more general, more traditional, if you want to again use the word traditional, startup accelerator like Startup Wise Guys, if I can apply to crypto focused startup accelerators? I have a couple of things to say about this, but since I am obviously biased because I work for Wise Guys, so maybe I first would like to hear your perspective on that, having worked with us for the previous Web3 batch.
So, I mean, the way I see it is that Web3 is a subculture at this point in time. Much like everything that has happened in the past, it starts small within a small group of people. And those people are the true believers that then bring it forward and then spread the word amongst the rest of the people in the world. And that's how it gains traction. There's also another thing that usually happens in these types of movements from the historic point of view. The people that actually drive these subcultures, because they're so how should I say it, absorbing for the people, and you really become obsessive with this type of thing, because you can really relate to this, otherwise you would not be an early adopter. You can relate to this, you can see it, you can see the story unfolding before everybody's eyes, so um, you become a fan of it, and the salesperson, and then you go and evangelize other people. When this happens, I mean, usually people don't have a 360 degree view of the world. They tend to get very focused, and there's a lot of stuff that comes along when you're actually building a startup. It can be very mundane things like, how do you hire people? How do you manage people? How do you set up a sales process? How do you validate your value proposition? How do you do this? How do you do that? How do you manage the cash flow? How do you pay the taxes? So there's a ton of these things. How do you grow? How do you hire people? And it goes on and on and on and on. And what these types of programs will give you is the necessary help to make sure that you have the tools in your toolbox to at least understand and address the most important topics when you're actually creating a business. And this is, I think it's the fairest comment that I can make for these types of things. Most of the people sort of come from the development side. They're developers, very good developers, but then what about the rest of the skill set that you need to do this type of thing? How about sales? How about human skill sets and emotional intelligence and all the stuff that comes around? And that's what you can expect to get in these types of programs. It's like, oh, okay, so I never knew that this happened, and that I had to deal with this type of thing. So now I know, and now I know that I have these tools to do it. So that's how I would put it.
Yeah, the way I look at it, it's like Web3 right now, in terms of user base, is an extremely small market. So the problem of a lot of Web3 apps right now, a lot of Web3 software, is that they're specifically built by people who like Web3 or are into Web3, and they build it for people like themselves, because these are the perspectives that they have. So these are people that are comfortable using wallets, they're comfortable having tokens, they're comfortable with self-custody. They're not even just comfortable with it, they're believers in it. And this is what you often, if you try and build this, if you build it this kind of way, you're building it for a very small market. Whereas the larger markets, or if we want to bridge this technology, which is a back-end technology, it's not supposed to be a front-end technology. The grand majority of smartphone and computer users in the world will not be comfortable having a wallet and having to guard their own passkey and all of those kind of things. And so I've a very good example of like how Web3 companies right now are lacking in sort of making this bridge and being attractive to bigger markets is very clearly visible in the way they do user experience and UI design. They are very hard to understand products. They're very hard for people that do not know Web3. And Web3 is just a technology. Nobody, like a bigger market will never buy a product because of the fact that it is Web3. It's about the utility of the thing. It's about what you can do with the thing. And so I think the grand benefit of having a more general sort of focused accelerator with a long track record and a lot of experience and a very broad mentor network in all of these kind of core things that are required to build a business, namely company building in terms of hiring, fundraising, sales and business development. Remember when we were talking about the focus on B2B? Whether you're building with Web3 technologies or you're building on blockchain or you're building with AR or VR technology or you're building an AI company, if you're selling B2B, then you will need to hire, you will need to do sales pitches, you will need to do business development, you will need to fundraise, you will need to know how to pitch. These things don't change. And in Startup Wise Guys, we have a very wide track record of doing all of these things very well. And then it's just a matter of applying it in the right sort of framing. Whereas what I see in what I hear from a lot of Web3 focused accelerators is that precisely you end up building an app for crypto people, and that total addressable market, all the people in the world that are using crypto right now, how much would that be? 100 million maybe worldwide, if I'm getting there already.
Yeah, and then again, I mean, everybody talks about this. Try and teach your grandparents on how to use MetaMask. And
Yeah, I mean, this you kind of like this sort of one little line is kind of summarizing everything I mean.
Yeah, and that's why everybody says, oh, there's a problem with UI, UX, and usability, and this and that. Yeah, I mean, you need to make things, because people when they use these type of things, they don't care if it's Web3, Web4, Web25, or whatever. I mean, it could be even be magical technology. Who cares? Or alien technology. They use it because they want to take some sort of utility out of it. I mean, I use this example a lot. You want to have a bath in the morning, a hot bath. You want the hot water. You don't care if it's heated with gas or with on your fireplace or in a boiler. Who cares about that? You just want the hot water done. And here goes the same thing. Nobody's going to use your product just because you tell them that it's Web3. Who cares about it? Try and make it more expensive and justify the difference because it's Web3, and you'll see where you will end up. Even if it was Web 300, that's what it is. I mean, there's utility, fine, I'll use it. There isn't. I couldn't care less about what's in there.
Yeah, I think one good example is if I'm working with the Web3 teams on things like UX and onboarding, sort of the example I refer most often to is actually Duolingo, which is not a Web3 app in terms of it has no blockchain in the backend, but it has this. It has a very intuitive user interface, and it has a lot of elements in it from the Web3 ethos. Namely, it's community based. There's quests in it. If you complete the quests, you get points. The points is somewhat of a currency that you have that you can spend to purchase items. So if you think about that, like gamification, quests, you have sort of economic assets within the game. The only thing that's really missing is that the XPs or the gems that you can gain there, they're not on a blockchain wallet, right? But they easily could be in terms of how the user experience has been designed. I think is a very good example of how to make a mass market software product. But the irony is kind of that the actual natively Web3 products built on blockchain with wallets and with self-custody and ownership and decentralization, they have absolutely terrible UX that is not that is unusable by 95% of all internet users. And if we were talking before about being uninvestable, this is basically being unmarketable. And then I haven't even talked about let's say copywriting landing pages, which is in most cases, if it is written by Web3 teams, is absolutely atrocious. It's like, yes, if you are a Web3 idealist, it's almost tribalism, right? It's like I know about crypto and you don't, and it becomes almost like this fanatical sort of identity. They understand it, but again, this is a total addressable market of, I don't think, even 100 million users right now. So going back to the main question, sort of the best practices in UX, copywriting, landing pages, crafting, storytelling, communication, business development, sales processes, hiring, all of those kind of things. I think it's very much a benefit to have a more generalized focused accelerator that has a track record of doing these things successfully across a wide diversity of contexts, all of which have been focused on creating and communicating value effectively. Actually, like, yes, we are focused on verticals, but it is actually sort of, that's the whole point. Those are all vertical agnostic things. These are the key standards, the fundamental building blocks for every business that do not change dramatically, whether you're building an AI company or a Web3 company or an XR company or a cybersecurity company.
At the end of the day, I mean, if you take a university course like in engineering, for example, you're going to get a baseline of math, physics, chemistry, all of that. And this is what we're talking about. You need to have a baseline of things in order to make sure that it works. Simple as that.
Was that your alarm?
No, that's a phone call.
So what else can we talk about? So maybe we can talk about how founders that want to apply to the program should best prepare their application. So maybe I should first run through you, like, it might be good if Tatiana, if you're in the back end listening to us, if you can post the link to the landing page and the application of the program in the comments. So if you go on the landing page, which should be, I mean, if you go on startwiseguys.com and you look at for founders and you check out the Web3 program landing page, you will find a link to the application form, which is a thorough form. We want to know a lot of things about you. There's what problem you're solving, how much traction you have, what the founding team is, what the cap table looks like, what sort of valuation you have right now, uploading of your pitch deck. So it will take you a while to complete the application, but this is all in your own interest, and it's a good exercise to do anyway, because this is something you will have to do many times. Other than that, are there any do's or don'ts or things that particularly stand out when we look through these applications to you, Pedro?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that I would tell you is do not put lipstick on the pig. Please. Because, I mean, it's fine if you miss something or if you're missing parts of the thing. It's absolutely fine. But you need to be honest and upfront with us, and I would say even more important, with yourself. Okay? So don't just come and do an application where there's 328 times the word AI and token and this and that and whatever.
Web 5.
And community, and this is the next Web 23 sort of thing. I mean, don't put lipstick on the pig. That's what I'm telling you. Showcase the stuff as it is, because we can dream as well, and we've seen a lot of these things throughout our lives, and we can recognize, or at least we think that we should be able to recognize good ideas, even if they're not complete. Okay, and again, there's no problem if you don't have 100% of the answers. I mean, there's a lot of these things that you figure out along the way. But you do need to understand and accept that you yourself do not have all the answers. Okay. So, in that sense, be honest. Don't start telling stories that even for you are detrimental to your success, and think of your business along the most basic, uh, first principle based sort of things. This is what we're doing. This is the idea. This is how we think it's going to happen. This is how we think we're going to make money, and so on and so forth. And the other thing that I would say is go ape on the competition, because if you come up and say there's no competition, it is a lie. That only means that you have not done your homework and you were lazy to the point that you didn't Google it. Because of course that there's competition out there. You're not going to come up, the chances that you're going to come up with something that nobody has thought of before are so damn small, so small, that they're next to none. So do your homework. This is what is being done currently in the market, and this is how we're different, and this is how we're going to maintain that difference. I would say that this is the most important thing. Be true to yourself and look at the stuff that you have in front of you from first principles based.
Yeah, I think you named a lot of red flags there indeed. Like, so if you're telling, we once had an application that said we are inventing the new internet. So these kind of like, how should I tell it, megalomaniac sort of visions. Obviously, if you have, I mean, he said he was going to invent the next internet with barely an MVP, essentially. And yeah, the other one is we have no competition. Is also something that just shows that you're lazy. And yeah, in the end of the day, so obviously there's some key metrics that we look at. So ideally, you have a you have early product market fit, so one or a couple more first customers that you have in sort of a market validation mode, so they are using it, they are ideally paying for it. That being said, at the end of the day, we look at each application case by case in their specific context, and I would say that at the end of the day, when we have to decide on the candidacy of a startup, it always comes down to, do we think this founder has what it takes to drive progress? Do we think they can execute? And a lot of that is about coachability and humility. So if you are saying, I'm going to build the next internet and we have no competition and I'm the smartest guy alive and nobody has ever done this before, that is the entire opposite of what we're kind of looking for. Is we are looking for somebody who's thoughtful, who has looked at all of the options, who is coachable. Yeah, so that's basically it. So yeah, if you're looking at an application, I think the word that comes to mind for me that I'm looking for is thoughtful. Have you thought about these questions deeply? Have you considered all of the options? Are you putting there a balanced analysis of where you are and where you want to go? And do you have a clear idea of where you want to go? But are you also at the same time aware of how much you don't know yet and open to being helped? Because that's at the end of the day what we're going to do, right? We're not here to, don't apply to us if you're already a unicorn. That's obviously what we're not looking for. It's there's a lot of things to be figured out, but that's exactly what we're here for. Why we could go in a partnership with you.
Yeah, and at the same time, you need to have the same degree of stubbornness and craziness to
Conviction.
to plow ahead. I mean, you need to be able to listen to everybody and then conclude on your own terms what's going to happen. Okay, so this is not blind execution of what people tell you.
That's a good nuance, yeah.
That's basically, I would say, it's the definition of learning. I mean, you listen to somebody and then you have enough critical judgment so that you decide which part of what that person is telling you, you should really listen to and incorporate, and which part you should just forget that it happened, because nobody's 100% right on everything that they say.
You
So
integrate and calibrate all the information available to you, and then you do your own thing.
and you need to be, I'm going to use the word stupid enough to believe that you can actually change the world with this type of attitude, and that you're going to make something really different. Because if you don't think that you're going to do it, who are you going to convince?
All right. If there's no more questions in the chat, then I think we can wrap up this session. Obligatory call to action. So I've heard meanwhile from my colleague Tatiana that the link to the landing page should be in the chat. So if you are a Web3 founder with an early stage startup, please apply. Either way, it will be a very insightful learning experience for you. So if you apply and you take the time to fill in the application mindfully, our scouting team will follow up with you shortly. If they, as Pedro said, it doesn't need to be perfect or fully complete. If we have follow-up questions, we will ask them. Essentially, if once you submit the application, you enter into our scouting dashboards, which is our database of all the startups that we have contacts with, and then you'll also have a direct communication channel with us. You can chat with our team; they can chat back to you. So, and at that point in time, you should be invited on quite short notice to so quite quickly. So I don't mean to say by short notice that it's going to overwhelm you, but you should quite quickly be invited to do a product demo, which is an online session with some of our team where you showcase your product, tell us a little bit about what you've been doing, where we'll also have some questions for you. And yeah, if you make a good impression there, then you're effectively being scouted by us to be a candidate for the program and to be invested in.
Oh, let me just step back for a second in terms of red flags. Some of the applications that we receive, because this is a good one. Some of the applications that we receive, people say we're going to do it all. We're going to boil the ocean and get the fish and do
And
this.
we're going to boil the ocean. This is going to get us fuel that will take us to the moon. And then on the moon, we're going to mine a new mineral, which is going to allow us to create way more efficient batteries. And we're going to solve the energy crisis forever. And nobody will ever need to build a nuclear.
Exactly. So there's a name for this. There's an academic name for this. It's called vertically integrated business, which is a great thing. So, please don't come up with a vertically integrated business as a startup.
That's a red flag. Yeah. So a startup does one thing very well for a very specific customer. So also, like Pedro was saying before, in the context of like, it cannot be that you have no competition. You do not need to be unique. You can just do the exact same thing as an already very big player in the market, but just do it a little bit better for a very specific kind of customer. For example, the sustainability manager of, I don't know, banks in Eastern Europe or whatever it is. So it doesn't need to be wholly unique. It just needs to be, you need to be solving one problem, one problem very well for a very specific customer. And yeah, then from there on out, it's just like how many of these customers are there in the world, and this is then your market size, and this is how we sort of assess your investability. But point being, focus.
Here's a specific example. Uber. There were taxis before Uber. So what Uber did was to revolutionize the user experience, and that's why it gained the traction that it did. It changes the user experience when people wanted to get a taxi. So
Yeah.
there you go. There's competition.
And now Ubers are just taxis again. They're now just, you just command them with apps instead of calling a dispatcher.
There you go.
I didn't think we were gonna end up with Uber on this one.
No, me neither.
But yeah, that's been it. Thank you all for attending. Thank you for your questions. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to connect with me and or Pedro on LinkedIn, and we can message there. And yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.
Thank you so much. Take care, guys.